Today's episode of the Our Hen House podcast is being sponsored by our partner, A Well-Fed World. A Well-Fed World is a hunger relief and animal protection organization chipping away at two of the world's most immense, unnecessary, and unconscionable forms of suffering. The suffering of people hungry from lack of food, and the suffering of animals used and abused for food. Mending our unjust food system is a critical part of solving the world's most destructive and persistent problems. Fortunately, the plant-based foods that promote health and well-being are the same foods that conserve resources to better feed the world while reducing greenhouse gas emissions and protecting the environment. A well-fed world provides the means for change by empowering individuals, social justice organizations, and political decision-makers to embrace the benefits of plant-based foods and farming. Learn more at awfw.org.
Our hen house is a squawking house. Our hen house is their hen house. Our hen house, ooh, it's a funky fresh house. Our hen house is your hen house.
Greetings, everybody. This is Jasmine Singer, and welcome to our hen house. Very excited to chat with you today. I'm so stoked about this episode. I'm going to be talking with Aryenish Birdie in just a few minutes, and Mariann is going to be speaking with Hayden Hunter. Aryenish is the founder of a new organization that's called Encompass, and we'll be chatting with her in just a bit. So just to let you know, it's a new organization that's working to bring inclusivity to the animal rights movement in a variety of capacities, and I think we have quite a lot to discuss with this ongoing dialogue about what that means. Hayden Hunter is Mariann's guest, our second interview today, and Hayden is the director of investigations for Last Chance for Animals, which is an international nonprofit organization that is dedicated to eliminating animal exploitation. So Mariann's going to be speaking with Hayden. And before we get to those two interviews, I just wanted to chat with you about something that happened to me the other day. I was doing a book talk at Nourish Cafe in San Francisco. And by the way, I am so obsessed with Nourish Cafe ever since I went there the other day. It's my new favorite restaurant in San Francisco and definitely one of my top faves of all times because it's exactly like the way I love to eat the most. Super nourishing, go figure. Very, very wholesome and healthy, but interesting and, you know, based in whole foods ingredients, but not just your kind of standard rabbit food that people often think of when they think of very simple, wholesome food. It was like just bowls and smoothies, and they made such an incredible spread for me and the guests of my book talk for my memoir, Always Too Much and Never Enough. I had a really great time. There were 3 flock members there, so shout out to those flock members. It was so great getting to know you a little bit. It's always fun when audiences are peppered with listeners and flock members, so thank you so much for that. Anyway, right before I went inside, there was kind of a cracking noise, like a truck ran something over, and I looked over and nothing, just a bucket of bones, like a bucket of chicken bones. I don't know if it was actually KFC, but it was one of those, buckets of fried chicken bones. And on the street were just these bones that somebody discarded. And discarded is kind of my key word here. These bones were discarded. These animals were discarded. Their lives were discarded. And I've been vegan a long time. Maybe you can relate to this, whether or not you've been vegan for a long time or whether you're not even vegan yet and you're just sort of on your vegan journey. But sometimes it just gets in. Sometimes I just see something like that and I stop and it's like, oh my God, these were lives. These were lives with all their, as Mariann says, all their little thoughts, all their little inclinations and all their family structures just ripped apart so that they could be discarded on this road. And, it was such a juxtaposition to then walk into Nourish Cafe, which is all about abundance and community and education and safe spaces and dialogues. And it's the opposite of discarding. It's bringing in, it's calling in, it's having truly actually a delicious place where we can have these much needed conversations and question ourselves and question our own preconceived notions, which is something that I'm doing constantly. And it's hard. It's hard to look at those individual lives or those discarded lives, those bones on the ground, and think, wow, there was a time when I too would have just discarded them. So who am I discarding now? Which individuals am I discarding? And am I one of them? Am I one of the individuals that I'm discarding? Because I certainly am. I'm not behaving in optimal alignment with who I want to be right now. And so that's also something I'm working on, both in terms of my consumption of like food and alcohol and all of that, and in the way I treat others. It needs to start with the way I treat myself. And so that's, obviously kind of the crux of what I talk about in my new TED Talk. Compassion unlocks identity. And I believe that that's true. I believe that compassion unlocks identity. So to see these bones on the street and then to go into Nourish Cafe and be in this beautiful environment, it's like jarring in a way. It's jarring to be confronted with things that make me uncomfortable, with people's viewpoints, with people kind of calling me out or calling me in. As my guest today is going to be talking about, things are so polarized right now in this country, and I think that they have been for a long time. It's just kind of coming to a head now, or maybe I hope this is the head. I hope this is it coming to a head. But these conversations about race, for example, they're uncomfortable, and that's why we need to have them. The conversations about the discarded individuals on the street, that's uncomfortable, and that's why we need to be having these conversations. And that's something that our hen house brings to the community, a place where we can have these conversations. Right at this moment in our country, it is so great that more and more of us are talking about these uncomfortable issues, including these uncomfortable issues of racism, and talking about it in the context of animal rights is paramount. It's very early on in Compass's trajectory. They've only just founded, and I think at the end of this interview, you'll hear that she's looking for people to join forces, and I'm thrilled. I'm so glad that these circles are being created, that these dialogues are happening, that we are calling ourselves and each other in. So let's continue to do it. You're going to hear my chat with Aryenish, followed by Mariann's talk with Hayden Hunter. And also, Mariann will be talking about current events from the world of animal rights and, yes, rising anxieties right after this. If you're not yet a member of the Our Hen House flock, but have been secretly dreaming of it, we have some exciting news for you. The flock, of course, is what we call our family of supporters. We're currently reconfiguring it and creating some different membership levels because we really want to grow that family. That means you. In a nutshell, monthly donation levels are now at $10, $15, and $25. And don't forget that Our Hen House is a nonprofit, so it's all totally tax deductible. Head on over to ourhenhouse.org/donate to join the flock. For $10 a month or a one-time yearly donation of $100, you get to be a part of the community on the Our Hen House Flock Facebook page, which has become such a vibrant place for people, including us, to share our worries, our concerns, and sometimes our successes in changing the world for animals. And at that level, you'll also receive access to some exclusive bonus content from our guests and the Our Hen House team. For $15 a month or a one-time yearly donation of $150, you also get that community of the flock page. You also get the exclusive bonus content, but you also get a very cool Our Hen House bumper sticker. And hopefully most important, the satisfaction of knowing that you're going the extra mile to support media that is changing the world for animals. And that's what it says. That's what the bumper sticker says. It says, change the world for animals. Go vegan. Then, if you're able and you really want to support us for $25 a month or a one-time yearly donation of $250, in addition to those other perks, we would love to announce your name on the podcast as a squawking supporter. As you may know, most of the people who listen to podcasts don't contribute to their costs. That is certainly true for Our Hen House. It's just the way it is. But we like to think that the ones who really benefit from Our Hen House are the animals. Every time one of our guests inspires someone to go vegan or to stay vegan, every time someone who feels all alone with their passion for animals is reconnected to a community of people who share that passion, the animals win. So for those of you who are flock members and who are considering becoming flock members, thank you. Welcome to our hen house, Aryenish.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor.
I am so excited. We were just chatting before I hit record, and we were like, have we met? And I don't think either of us have landed on an answer, but I think that we should meet in person in the very near future, because I've been aware of your work for a very long time. I've been a fan of all that you're doing, but I'm like one of your biggest fans now. I'm so excited about Encompass, and it's like everyone is talking about it. So I'm so grateful that you're on our hen house to chat about it. What's something that's been sort of driving me bananas lately, both with my work here at our hen house and also my work at Veg News, is that sometimes people say that when you bring up the idea of inclusion and diversity in the animal rights movement, they'll say something like, this is about animals, not about race. And, that just, it makes my nipple hairs grow. It just, I hate it so much. It's obviously nonsense. I want to know about Encompass, but can you start with what would your response to that be?
Yeah, it's actually the very first question on our FAQ on our website. And something that I say a lot is that in a mostly white movement, people of color often feel like they don't belong. And so if we want this movement to be about animals and reaching the most amount of people, we have to acknowledge that this is an issue that our country faces. So if we want our movement to expand, we need to be an inclusive space for people of color to feel comfortable joining. We want the activists who are in this movement to not feel they have to put their identities on hold while they do activism in this movement. Because if they feel that way, they'll cycle out and then we're back at square one. So I think this is a movement made up of humans fighting for animals. It's inherently an ally movement. And so it's not fair for the folks who are in this movement fighting or the animals if we're not acknowledging that this is an issue faced by all.
Yeah, I think that's so true. And I was mentioning to you also before we started recording that I recently had AFCO on the podcast, and her interview was one of my favorites in the
Love
last.
her.
Yeah, just brilliant. So good.
Her book is amazing.
Yeah, I know. So excited about it too. Just one of the best things that came out of 2017 and the last decade, in my opinion. And anyway, I got more feedback and more emails and more Facebook messages from that interview than any other interview in the history of our hen house in the last 8 years. And
wow.
it was over the top enthusiastic and over the top furious. And you had some interesting responses to that when I mentioned that earlier.
More so just not lack of being surprised. Race is one of the most divisive issues in this country. So people have a lot of opinions about it. And it doesn't surprise me that you would get a lot of love mail and a lot of hate mail because this is such a divisive topic. And talking about animals is often divisive. So when you merge those two things together, it can be an explosive combination. But I think it's one that we need to dig into in the animal movement. And that's why I started Encompass, because I think this is something that I've heard people talk about and want to think through more, but just haven't felt they have the tools or the bandwidth to really take on. So I wanted to create dedicated space to that. And so, I'm not at all surprised to hear that was the reaction to your interview with her.
Yeah. I appreciate that you're creating, as you called it, a dedicated space to it. This is something I think a lot of us think about and try and work out and implement. And having little guideposts is helpful, and creating guideposts is also helpful. It's something I've been working on at both our hen house and Veg News. Breeze Harper recently posted something asking for, animal rights organizations and companies to take a stand against racism just publicly. And so I did so at Veg News, and I'm in the process of creating an inclusivity policy. And it's something that I think that I'm really passionate about, that so many people who listen to this show are passionate about. I'd love to know how Encompass is working to achieve the goals of your organizations.
Yeah, so Encompass has two core programs. The first is to support animal protection organizations to help them maximize effectiveness among staff and help them understand why diversity and inclusion are important and should be factored into our bottom line. So steps within that we plan to roll out include presenting to movement leadership and staff about how they can do this work effectively and authentically, not in a way that's just cosmetic diversity, which is just bringing in brown and Black people and not really hearing their ideas, but doing this in a way that's non-tokenizing and really helps shift culture. We also plan to create a set of inclusion and diversity joint principles for farm animal protection groups to sign on to. And so this is kind of what Breeze was talking about in that blog post. We need to have a clear vision for a movement and demonstrate that we take these issues seriously. So that's something that Encompass plans to also support organizations in doing. And we also plan to create publicly available data-driven reports to help us understand the state of our movement now, why we're in the position we're in, and track progress, and then identify long-term goals for our movement. The other strategy involves supporting advocates of color and help them find themselves in leadership roles. Right now, 8% of our movement is made up by leaders of color, and a mere 11% are staff of color. So these are really small numbers, especially when you look at the national numbers, which is our country is made up of 38% people of color. And by 2044, will be 51% people of color. I know that's a lot of numbers, but it really just goes to show that our country's demographics are changing. And if we don't change with it, we're going to be irrelevant. So the second program involving supporting advocates of color is one that I really am excited about. And I'm looking forward to creating a mentorship program wherein younger and newer advocates connect with older, more established mentors. We also want to offer in-person and web-based leadership skills training opportunities for advocates of color to help them advance their careers and propel the movement forward. And we're already recommending advocates of color for various public and professional opportunities, like speaking at Veg Fest and just various speaking engagements, serving as spokespeople and serving on organizational boards. We want these people to be speaking for our movement and for the animals, because I think that's it's really important for the public to see different types of people sharing this message, not just a fairly homogenous group of people.
I'm really happy to hear all of that, and just including the research that you're doing into this, because I think that just really pinning this down would be so helpful for people who just make such ignorant statements, such as the one that I mentioned at the top of this interview. Can you explain the difference between diversity and inclusion and how that might relate to the animal rights movement?
Yeah, so there's this really amazing Black woman who does diversity consulting. Her name is Verna Myers, and she has this amazing quote that I love so much. She says, diversity is being invited to the party. Inclusion is being asked to dance. And I feel like that so eloquently captures that distinction. Diversity is what you have, and inclusion is what you do. So, like I said, we don't want to just have Black and brown people doing the work that is dictated by white folks. We want to have those ideas harnessed and supported by our movement. So inclusion is really that deliberate act of welcoming diversity and creating an environment where different kinds of people can thrive and succeed. And, acknowledging that having a diverse team or group or workforce is not enough. We want everyone to feel safe and encouraged to participate to the maximum potential of their ability and feel that they have equal footing as everyone else. And equity is actually another term that we're hearing more and more. Equity in the workplace means that everyone's receiving fair treatment and everyone has equal access to opportunities. And that's another piece of this whole puzzle. So we're working on all three fronts. And I know these are kind of buzzwords to a lot of people, but they really are important in helping us shift that culture. And I think it's important for us to understand the difference between those.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that too. I also appreciate it. For anyone listening to this who hasn't heard Af's interview yet, listen to it when you're done hearing Aryenish, because Af goes into this also quite eloquently. I have a question for you, and I'm having a hard time articulating it to myself because I feel like it's an inherently problematic question. So hopefully you can bear with me as I work through this.
Okay.
So I guess I want to know what your advice would be for like listeners who want to help foster diversity and inclusion more specifically within the movement. But I think that I hold myself back a little bit from wanting to ask that because I don't want to be like, okay, person of color, can you please advise us white folk or something like that. So I guess my question is the question itself. And then my question is it an inherently problematic statement? Like, isn't it not up to someone else to be like educating white people on this matter?
So I'll answer the second question first. For the most part, I think that is something white folks should check themselves on when they are asking people of color to only speak about race or help educate them. But I am kind of positioning myself as someone who wants to help white folks work through this. So for me specifically, I don't think it's a problematic question because this is something I'm trying to help offer the movement. Actually, one of the programs I plan to roll out hopefully next year includes a white ally group, and I would really love white folks to dig into that and help think through these challenges. So I would say yes, for the most part, check yourself when you're asking others. But for me, I think it's okay. I am okay with being asked that question, and that's something that I want Encompass to help support our movement with. So to answer the first question, what advice would you have or do I have? I've got a lot of different ideas. Some of them are on our website, but to share briefly here, something that I'm sure you talked about with AF is that people of color have been in our movement for decades and they're doing this work. They just don't get the visibility and attention they deserve. So this isn't an issue for the movement on the whole, because a lot of activists of color do this work in ways that aren't their full-time jobs. Encompass is really focusing on supporting the mainstream movement, the part of the movement that's professionally employs advocates, rather than folks who do community-based activism in their own communities. And that's often regularly run by people of color. So I would say support those efforts financially and with time on social media. Follow prominent vegans of color on social media and really digest what they have to say. Lauren Ornelas with the Food and Empowerment Project has been talking about these issues for years. AFCO, of course, Breeze Harper with the Sister Vegan Project, Liz Ross with Vegan Advocacy Initiative. These amazing people have been talking about these issues, and I think we should listen to them and really follow them. I would also say it's important for white folks in particular to be comfortable with being challenged. Listen with an open mind, even if it makes you uncomfortable. Start noticing race and talking about it. Even if you think it doesn't impact you, it does. Start noticing the spaces that you're in and how homogenous they are. Take an inventory of your friend group and your communities and your workplaces.
And your bookshelves.
Yeah, and your bookshelves.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but that was something that I many years ago when I remember Patrice Jones told me that. She's like, look at your bookshelf. And how many of those folks are white and how many of those folks are people of color? And I was like, oh my gosh. It was a big eye opener for me.
Kind of like what we were saying earlier, don't ask people of color to speak on behalf of an entire community, and don't ask them to only speak about race issues. People of color are brilliant organizers and campaigners, and we should be soliciting feedback on various issues from them. But it's also important to take time to show solidarity with other social movements via social media, but also in the streets. And I know this is something that's challenging for some folks. They say, we don't want to abandon our movement. All movements are single issue to a certain degree. And I'm not saying that we should abandon the animals at all, but we can show support in an authentic way without asking for anything in return. And I think from time to time, we should do that. There are opportunities where it's very obvious that we should be doing that, and we should step up when those opportunities arise. So I would say, know when to research and do your homework, and also talk about these issues in your communities, but also know when to stop talking and listen to other folks. If you see things that are problematic, step up and say something, but you always should defer to the people of color in the room. So those are some tips that I have. There are more. I'd love to hear from other people. Actually, after Charlottesville, I wrote a blog post, 8 things white folks can do to support people of color. And a lot of people were really appreciative of that. And there's definitely way more that we can be doing. And Encompass will plan to support advocates as they do that, as we do that work moving forward.
That's really great. I appreciate the supportive environment and the places where you're also just challenging people to challenge ourselves. So just circling back to one of the first questions I asked you when people respond to issues like this, saying this is about the animals, not about race. I'm getting stuck on this because part of me is like, well, should we be responding on social media, for example? I mean, like one thing that Af talked about was that she just stays off of social media now.
Yeah.
So I just it's so easy to be behind a screen and be saying statements like that and be saying, I ignorant statements like that and bullying statements and statements that create microaggressions like that. And, I deal with that myself when I write about LGBTQ overlaps with animal rights and things like that. I deal with it with comments too. And I don't look at them anymore. But I guess I'm wondering, should we be stepping up in circles like that and responding, or is that just a waste of time?
I sympathize. I hate Facebook debates. It just never feels good to me. But I am, I guess, a realist in that a lot of activism happens on social media. That's what people use to communicate. That's the medium that most people are talking to other people through. And so I guess, I definitely would never want to encourage bullying or, having race-related fights on social media. But I think it's a space where we can talk about these issues and highlight that we support them. So I would, I guess, encourage the folks who are on my side to use social media to talk about this. But I understand that frustration and that desire to kind of retreat. And I would say it's really up to you as an individual. I'm not sure if I'm fully answering your question, but I do think that it's important for us to show solidarity and talk about these issues in the forums that are being used. And I think social media is it. So does that answer your question?
It does. I mean, I would just add to that we have to be true to our authentic selves. So if you hear this question and you're like, oh, dude, I am not weighing in, then don't weigh in. There's other places to weigh in. But if you're like, oh, yeah, for sure. I sprained my ankle this week and I'm just going to sit with my foot up, drinking my coffee and responding to shit, then do so. So I guess the other thing I would add is one thing I find useful occasionally is to respond once. And then don't take the bait when, I find that is useful for others. Maybe not so much for the internet bully who is saying it originally, but for other eyeballs who are like, ooh, that is actually a good question, and they're wondering what the other side is. So that would be my advice to just.
I like that.
Yeah, just throw that in there too. So are you okay if I ask you a couple personal questions?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. So you've been in the quote unquote movement for a long time. And I guess I'm curious what your experience has been working for animal rights and how this has led up to your work with Encompass.
Yeah. So I started in the quote unquote animal protection movement in 1997 when I was in the 7th grade and I was presented with the frog dissection project. And my mom and I were very opposed to my doing that, even though we weren't vegan and had no real awareness around animal issues. And through that, I learned all the ways in which animals are used in laboratories. And then from there, it was a slippery slope to learning how animals are used in society in so many different capacities. But my work has primarily been focused on the use of animals in labs. My previous job at the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine focused exclusively on animal experimentation issues, and that's really where most of my work has been. I've done a lot of grassroots activism looking at these issues, but never professionally and in a full-on way. I have experienced racism in the movement, and I know so many other people of color have. And I think what's really important for us to take from that is that it doesn't have to be that way. And I see so many people express frustration, and I wanted to create space, like I said, to acknowledge these issues. It really came down to me looking around the room at various conferences. I went to several conferences last year, and I was like, I'm the only person of color here. I'm one of 5. These are rooms with hundreds of people. And it was that moment where I just felt kind of alone. And I know the other folks of color felt alone, and I didn't want that to be the way it is. And so I did this informal analysis that I mentioned, where I looked at the top 20 farm animal protection organizations and looked at the numbers and saw the cold hard numbers, which were in the single digits of people of color being represented by the professional animal protection movement. And I just felt there was an opportunity. And so that's really, I guess those are my experiences to help get me to this point.
One of my favorite answers from guests when I ask questions like, how did you start what you're doing, or how did you get into this work? One of my favorite answers is like, well, there was a need for this, and so I did it. I love so much that, as opposed to that, like, well, geez, somebody should do something about blah, blah, blah. And then like, well, like there's a need for something, so do it. So I appreciate that very much. I appreciate that you were coming from a place of passion, of personal experience, and of like an understanding of how like the lack of inclusivity within the animal protection movement has really been undermining everything. And do you think that things are changing? I mean, you've been doing this work for a long time. Like, do you think things are changing? And if so, do you think they're changing in the right direction or no?
I do think things are changing. When I started thinking about whether I wanted to start this organization, I had dozens and dozens of conversations with activists all over the movement, from all over the country geographically, but also different portions of the movement. And overall, I heard so much excitement for a project like this. And something that gives me so much hope is that so many of the folks in these larger groups want something like this. They really do believe in these principles. They just don't know how to take the steps to get there. So, it's going to be definitely a work in progress, and I'm excited to see how things play out once I'm actually getting in there with groups and with advocates and pushing them. That's going to, look differently than it does right now, which is more theoretical, and people are all for these concepts in theory. But I feel so optimistic. I really hear so much enthusiasm. And so that's really what's been guiding me through this whole process. Starting an organization is no small feat. There is so much drudgery and administrative work, and my optimism and hope is really what has been guiding me through this whole process. And that really has come from movement advocates from across this country saying they're excited about this group. So I definitely feel really good.
Yeah, I feel really good too. I'm really glad about that. All of that. So I have another question that I'm also having a hard time articulating in my head. And it's Mariann and I have long talked about what we call gotcha activism. And it's, it's sort of like, shaming someone because they say something wrong but they're well intended. And I think I have seen that result in silence instead. I have seen it result in people not even articulating the question that might come out flawed, such as what I'm doing right now. I've seen it result in like the person on the other end just being like, "Oh no, you didn't," like just really taking the opportunity to make that person like feel bad. And I guess I just want to know your thoughts on this, because in my opinion, both sides need to change. I mean, I'm trying to go into the uncomfortable areas. I'm trying to say things that I will probably, hopefully in a few days, weeks, months, years, maybe hours, be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I said it. That I can't believe I thought that. I can't believe I felt that. Like, I want to be evolving, but I need a safe space in order to do so. And also, like, woe is me, like the white person in the room who feels bad about saying shit. Like, there's so many layers and levels that are problematic here. And I guess I want your thoughts on that. Like, I want people to feel comfortable saying things. And I think that it should be responded to with patience, but maybe that's a racist statement, just inherently.
No, I get that. This is one of the hardest questions and something I'm honestly still grappling with too. I agree that there needs to be space to work through issues. No one is perfect. I've messed up. I mean, race is a complicated conversation, and I'm sure I have made people uncomfortable at times. I've never intended that. But as I go through my awakening process, which I'm still currently in and will until the day I die, I understand that there needs to be some type of space. We also need to not make people of color uncomfortable when those types of questions and moments arise. And so holding that balance is really tricky. I think being humble when you talk about these issues is really important. We had a really awesome woman of color write a blog post about her experiences after the AR conference, and she was very tokenized, and several people came up to her. She's not a Black person, but she, is a person of color, and people were asking her, why are there not more people of color here? Asking her to speak on behalf of an entire group, and a group that wasn't hers, that she identifies with. And it sparked a very lengthy discussion on our blog because someone commented and said, this person was well-intentioned. Why are you calling them out like this? And she didn't use a name or anything, but it speaks to this level of confusion of how do we have this conversation in a way that is comfortable for everyone involved. And I think, there is no real answer. If I had one, I feel like I would be a millionaire in some world. But I think being humble and saying, I don't understand exactly why why you're feeling this way, or I'm sure I'm not asking this question in the way that I want to, in the way that you just did right now, asking me this question, can really go a long way. I don't think people of color expect the whole world to just change overnight. There is going to be a slow process in moving to having this world be a better, more comfortable place for people of color, and we all understand that. So there is a balance between these two things. I think if you are a person who holds a level of privilege, especially with respect to race, you should acknowledge that and respect and kind of defer to the people of color when you're asking these types of questions or working through something. But I agree with you. We need to be uncomfortable to come out the other side and be a stronger person for it. There's no way we're going to address and acknowledge and be a better group of people or better individual without having those uncomfortable moments and those moments where we're squeamish and we look back and we say, what were we thinking? So I guess just know that that's part of the process. And this is, something we're all doing together. And if you come from a good place, if you come from a place of love and you come from a place of trying to be better, that's, I think, all that we can really do. I mean, I really believe that.
Yeah, I mean, I already feel like I see the issues in the way I even posed that question a minute ago. But, I want to leave it in this interview intact because I've been doing this a very long time, and both animal rights work and also just thinking about these other issues that are related, and I don't have it down at all. And I'm just, my poor white tears, right? But another thing I wanted to bring up was when I interviewed Rafaela Ciavatsa and Lilia Trenkova from Collectively Free, one thing that they talked about was just calling ourselves out and calling out our just evolving. I guess my own twist on it is being open to being a lifelong learner and calling it out sometimes publicly. It's something that I really appreciate when authors do it who have been writing for a long time, when activists do it. I have certainly done things in my early activist career that I would never, ever do now because everything has changed. I have changed. The world has changed. And I think it was Rafi calls themselves out on something that I won't do for them, but listen to that interview because it's fascinating. And I was interviewing Tracy McWhirter recently, and after the interview, we were chatting, And she was saying how it was just like lots of white folks on the cover of brochures. And I was like, I know, what is that about? You know, and it was more just like a turn of phrase, the way I was saying that. And she was like, you tell me.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my gosh. And that moment, it really impacted me. And I always think of Tracy saying, you tell me. And like, okay, yeah, why would I ask? I wasn't exactly asking Tracy, but I was sort of asking Tracy. So anyway, it's calling ourselves out, being open to changing. And one thing that I find hope in is that people who are listening to this and people who are turned on to animal rights and people who have gone vegan at some point were uncomfortable with their behavior of how they were consuming and oppressing other individuals and went through the often uncomfortable and ultimately liberating process of going vegan. So, you know, it's just to me like a different spoke on the same wheel. Does that resonate with you?
Absolutely. I totally agree with the calling yourself out or calling yourself in. I know call in culture is something that's really important, but I totally agree. I mean, this is something that I say on our website. If we ask people to change and open their eyes to the issue of animals all the time. And so we should take our own medicine and recognize that there is a issue within our own movement. We believe in these concepts and theory, so we need to follow our own advice and put our ethics into action ourselves. You know, we say that to other people all the time, but we need to make our own movement better from the inside out. And so this is an opportunity to do that. And, you know, there's no real other way to say that other than, yeah, we've got work to do ourselves. We can't only expect to do activism and expect others to change. We have to do work within ourselves.
Well, so what do we do next if we're listening to this? I think a lot of people are going to really appreciate what you're saying and will probably appreciate some like ideas for how to step this up. Is it, you gave some ideas earlier, check your friend circles, check your bookshelf circles and we should start to educate ourselves, speak up and out whenever we can in ways that make us feel uncomfortable. And as for working with organizations and companies, animal rights ones, is there any words of wisdom you might have for us?
I am still putting my programs together. I literally just launched last month on August 1st. So I would say sign up for a mailing list if that's not too much of a cop-out answer.
No, it's not.
encompassmovement.org. And I plan to keep folks abreast of the things that we are rolling out and ways that we would like involvement from the larger community, especially the sympathetic community. If you've got concrete skills that you'd like to share with me and with this group, I'd love to be in touch with you. You can email me at info@encompassmovement.org. So, yeah, I mean, I guess while I'm on the pitch, maybe follow us on social media, Encompass MVMT, short for movement, on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And yeah, I think those are ways that you know, you can stay connected to us and learn about what we're doing as we're doing it. I'm still fleshing the next 12 months out, so I am looking for more ideas and support and anything that the listeners can help me with.
I'm sure you'll hear from people, and I so appreciate everything that you're doing. And I'm excited to talk to you at the beginning of this organization, because I'd love to have you back on the regular to discuss, you know, what's new with Encompass and just, you know, just keep the dialogues going. So
definitely.
Thank you so much for joining us today in our hen house, and I'm sure we'll chat really soon.
Thank you, Jasmine. I really appreciate you having me on.
That was Aryenish Birdie from Encompass. And I am Jasmine Singer. So thank you so much. I'm going to hand it over to Mariann in just a second. So you hold on tight, because there's some really great stuff coming up for the rest of the show today. I just wanted to let you know that if you want to be in touch with me, if you have any follow-up questions to any of this, or you want to keep the dialogue going, do so either over email or social media. You can email me directly at jasmine@ourhenhouse.org. There's no E on Jasmine, so it's just JASMIN at ourhenhouse.org. Find me on Twitter, Jasmine_Singer. On Instagram, it's Jasmine Singer Author. On Facebook, just look up my name. There's a personal page and an author page. And speaking of author stuff, I have a bunch of events coming up for my book. So check out my website, jasminesinger.com. I hope to see you at some of the upcoming events and pick up a copy of Always Too Much and Never Enough, wherever books are sold. Thank you so much. I'm going to hand it over to Mariann. We have a very exciting announcement. Our hen house is super proud to be taking part in the first Compassion Arts and Culture and Animals Foundation Festival. The festival consists of 4 shows over the weekend of October 21st and 22nd to be performed at Symphony Space on 95th Street and Broadway in New York City. Performers will include our very own Michael Herron, photojournalist Joanne MacArthur, and many other singers, presenters, and artists. Our hen house will be recording the radio play Sanctuary by John Yunker live, and we want you to be a part of the audience. As some of you know, the animal rights philosopher Tom Reagan sadly died this year. All the proceeds from the festival are going to benefit his organization, the Culture and Animals Foundation, which has sponsored many activists and artists over the years, including our hen house. We hope you can join us at this amazing festival. To check out the shows and buy your tickets, visit CompassionArtsFestival.com. See you there.
Okay, now we're going to get into the news, but we're going to focus on one particular news story and some of its implications this week, because it's a really big news story, and you might have heard about it. It's what happened at the Guggenheim Museum in New York, and the cancellation. Well, first of all, it's just been a whirlwind week, because within the week there was this enormous protest about an exhibit, or several works in an exhibit that is at the Guggenheim, and those works were actually removed from the exhibit. So that's all happened. And it really has entered into the news and the public consciousness. And luckily enough, since I know a lot about animals, but I don't know much about contemporary art, I have my dear friend, David Cabrera, here to just chat a little bit about what happened and what the meanings are. And David is a principal and co-founder of one of the most prominent contemporary art galleries in Manhattan, Alexander Gray Associates. He's also been an activist for many years in a bunch of different issues, and that includes animals. And he, among many other roles, he serves as president of the board of Woodstock Farm Animal Sanctuary. So he has really thought about these issues a lot. He's also my very good friend. Thanks so much for joining me today to talk about this, David.
Oh, so happy to be here. Thank you for asking me.
It is really my pleasure, and I'm making you do this for the second time today because I recorded you before, and I forgot to turn on the microphone, so I'm incredibly embarrassed, but we're going to do an even better job, everybody. The first one was just practice. So now I'm going to look at my microphone to make sure it's recording. I think it's recording. I think so. So, David, getting back to the issue at hand and not my problems. Let's just talk. I know you'd like to talk about the bigger issues here and not just focus on what happened, but I would like to talk a little bit about what happened. So can you just tell us a bit about the controversy this week?
Well, of course I'm happy to, but I do want to emphasize and even caution us, not you, Mariann, but culture in general, or people that are critics of culture, that we need to keep the issue on the animals, on the exploitation of animals, on the abuse of animals, and even the usage of animals in many contexts, and in this case, contemporary art. As you mentioned, it's with the Guggenheim Museum in New York, an exhibition on contemporary Chinese artists that actually, as of this recording, has yet to open, but it's about to open, had decided to pull works that either have, that both have live animals and documentation of art performances that at that point animals were used. But I do want to keep away, and you're welcome to, of course, but I do want to keep it away from the artists and keep it more on what I think of as the real issue. But you may want to mention that, I realize.
Well, I mean, since we are going through the news, and since maybe not everybody has has read about this issue. I'll just briefly describe the works as I heard them described to me. One is called Dogs That Cannot Touch Each Other. This is by Peng Yu and Sun Yuan. And 4 pairs of dogs, I believe they're pit bulls, or perhaps, no, I think they're pit bulls, not mastiffs. They're both bred and trained to fight. And they're put on non-motorized treadmills, so they are struggling to reach each other and touch each other and staring at each other, but cannot reach each other. Then there's a video of a case study called A Case Study of Transference, which shows 2 pigs having sex before an audience. And one of the questions of cruelty here is whether there were some descriptions of these pigs as having been tattooed with Chinese characters or perhaps fake Chinese characters. And other descriptions said they were stamped. Probably they were stamped because that would be a hell of a lot easier. And that is by an artist called Zhu Bing, though of course artists don't tend to stray away from doing things in a difficult way. And then the final piece, which perhaps was the most controversial because it actually involved live animals at the museum. This was a big case which was going to feature hundreds of live insects and reptiles milling under an overhead lamp and sometimes eating each other and attacking each other. And that was by Huang Yangping. And I know you want to focus on the bigger issues, but I know one of the issues that you talked about to me, which I thought was very helpful to me in understanding, was that you feel really strongly about the question of whether this is art. And can you talk a little bit about? I know a lot of the protests about it said this isn't art, this is cruelty. Is that a coherent statement for you?
Well, yes, it is. I mean, I know this isn't so popular among many of my fellow animal rights activists, but the reality of it is that it is art. We learned these cultural lessons, and those of us that are in the contemporary art world, a long time ago. It just doesn't, when something is art, it really only, to make it art, all we really need is the context, or rather, actually to simplify it, it's the artist proclaiming it art. I realize that can be offensive to people for artworks that they find offensive, but really the issue in this case with the animals, it's not about whether it's art or not. It's really about the animals. It's not about the curators. It's not about the institutions. It's about the using of animals. So in my book, these particular works is really bad art made by insensitive, less aware artists. And if you think about it with Andy Warhol, when he first appeared, his work first appeared in New York City, there was a lot of controversy about whether or not it's art. And I found that discussion rather tedious in studying it when I was a graduate student, and also in the years ahead. Well, actually, it even continues. So we hear this old argument, my 3-year-old can make that. Yes, your 3-year-old could make that, and that would be art too. So art belongs to all of us. You hear a lot of people say, I don't have a creative bone in my body. Actually, we do. We're all creative people. We're born with it, as are animals. So I prefer and think it's more useful to keep the issue on how immoral and unethical it is to use animals, period, but in this case, within a contemporary art context. Putting animals in a museum to be gawked at, to be looked at, is no different from a zoo. And then adding any element of torture, and torture can go as far as, or can begin with something in terms, something as seemingly innocent as letting an animal rest on concrete in a museum, to provoking the animal, or to physically provoking the animal, torturing the animal. So I think it's important to remember that us as humans, to arrange, to control, to just use animals is terribly wrong. And one of the great things about this current situation is that it's brought it to the surface in an even bigger way, because it's attracted the attention of not just animal rights activists, but people that are less involved with those issues or not involved with those issues, and including people that are not involved with art issues.
Well, I just think that that's exactly the point here of why this is important, because it has brought the attention. And I hope that the conversation that's going on, well, I was thinking in the art world, but perhaps elsewhere as well, is sensitive. I do find that the museum's response was not only, it just didn't seem very thoughtful. I mean, in the first place, they didn't seem to be prepared for the fact that this was going to be controversial. Their language about it beforehand didn't really cover the issues very well. And then their reasons for pulling the exhibit were just, they said that there had been threats of violence. I just, as I've said on the podcast a million times, I just hate it when that kind of vague threats of violence. If there were threats of violence here, people should be arrested. There should have been an investigation, and an art exhibit should not have been pulled. If you had threats of violence by Nazis against an exhibit about the Holocaust, would you pull the exhibit? No, you'd get guards and you'd have it. So that was so unsatisfying. It almost seemed like just trying to avoid the issue, making it about animal rights activists instead of about what art is. It just seems like an opportunity was lost here. But is that opportunity, as you're saying, that opportunity is being taken up within the art press and even elsewhere about that this exhibit has provoked some thoughtful conversations?
Yes, and I agree with you. It was not a thoughtful response on the museum's part. It was not a thoughtful response on some of the cultural writers. It was a lazy response. It was a shifting of blame, or rather it was a creating blame, in this case on the animal rights protesters, the activists, to once again adhere to that stereotype of the crazies out there speaking for animals. And really what it boils down to when you hear things like that, both explicitly or implicitly, that they're only animals, then we go to talking about what in my opinion, the most valuable discussion that can come out of this is speciesism in general. But in this case, in an art context, in a contemporary art context, art reflects who we are. In the years ahead, humans will be looking back at this time and seeing who we are as a culture. And so, this is something not to be proud of. But the good part of it, even with my impatience, because it's such a dire situation with so many animals not only being mistreated, but being literally slaughtered every day all around us, 24 hours a day, that, sorry, I get so upset when I hear those words. Mariann, where was I? It's just, my impatience with it. When I hear the constant analysis, whether or not it's art, should we remove it, should we not remove it? I just want to say, fuck it. Stop abusing the animals today.
Well, I think it's always important when any issue like this enters the kind of the zeitgeist to always remember. And you said this to me when we first started talking about it, which I really, really struck me. It's like, what about the animals being served for lunch in the cafeteria of that museum? We always have to bring it back to all of the animals that are suffering whenever an issue like this brings in, enters the consciousness, and let's hope that's happening. And I think it's the activist's job to always make that happen, not just to say the Guggenheim is being cruel, but to say cruelty is all around us. But there are particular issues surrounding art that I just think crystallize so many of the issues that have to do with animals. And one of them is cultural. And of course, this was a Chinese exhibit, and the artists defended it, saying it wasn't cruel. And there is a certain hesitation within the art world to make judgments about moral issues that arising from other cultures. And to be clear, there was controversy in China as well about these exhibits, a matter which has kind of been softened in the way it's being talked to by now. But still, how do we deal with cultural sensitivity when issues of animals come up in art?
It's tough. It's a tough one. We, of course, need to be culturally sensitive. That's how we progress as cultures. And, is it cruel? Or rather, it wasn't cruel. So if we take another living being, and let's say a dog, and literally twist her arm, we know that pain is inflicted, right? We know that. So we can argue or discuss whether or not it's believed to be cruel, but after a while, come on, we have to look at data. We have to look at what we know. We're smart enough now. And so it's complicated. I'm a person of color. I don't like it when people tell me how I should be. But deep down with all of us, we know. We know. Artists know. Artists, by the nature of calling oneself an artist, today especially, it's a political act. In the same way that gay men, lesbians, when we say we're queer, it's taking on a political identity. It's acknowledging that there is a struggle. Sadly, many artists don't recognize this, or we're not taught it in the institutions. But the good news about artists, about art, the makers of culture, the makers of artworks, is that we can bring this to a higher level, to the dialogue, the discourse, to a higher level. And while I might be impatient with all the animals being killed right now and abused, better that we get to work on this now. And I think it's good again that it has surfaced in such a rigorous manner.
Yeah, I think it's great that it surfaced. And in spite of the almost unbelievable naivete of the museum and not understanding that this would be as controversial as it was, and their unfortunate, unthoughtful response, it still has provoked an enormous conversation. So I think a lot of people are expressing the feeling that there's a conflict here between artistic freedom and being kind to animals, as if artists have to be allowed to do whatever they want in order to have artistic freedom. But I don't feel like you see that there's this conflict at all. Am I right?
That's correct. I mean, especially with many of us contemporary, or not just contemporary, but conceptual artists. The way in our training, we're trained to be hypercritical of what we produce, of what we see in the world, and culture in general. But one thing we forget is that, well, in this case, is that we get to have both. We get to hold on to our innate human kindness. We get to have that, of course, and be fantastic, meaningful artists that make a mark. Let's leave the animals out of it. If we want to refer to animals, we should be able, of course, to refer to animals. But animals are not metaphors, and animals are not art supplies.
Oh, that was really, really well said. Thanks so much for bringing so much thoughtfulness to this issue, David.
Thank you, Mariann. I always learn so much from you.
Our Hen House has a family of podcasts. In addition to the Our Hen House podcast, which of course you happen to be listening to right now, you can listen to the Animal Law podcast or Teaching Jasmine How to Cook Vegan on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you like what you hear, and let's face it, what's not to like, please leave us a friendly review on iTunes or Stitcher. You don't know how important it is to us to get those reviews. That's how we grow, and that's how we reach more and more people with information on how to change the world for animals.
In a moment, Hayden Hunter of Last Chance for Animals will be joining me. But before we get to that, I just want to mention that we have some really, really exciting bonus content for the flock. The flock is, of course, our family of donors that you can join at ourhenhouse.org/donate. So we've promised bonus content, and this is our first one, and I think it's really cool. It's a really special treat. Jasmine's going to speak with Eric Adams, who's the Brooklyn Borough president, and a lot has been said about the unbelievably important health reasons behind his very well-publicized move to veganism. But Jasmine, in talking to him, focuses on the animals. If you're a flock member, you'll be getting this special bonus audio delivered to your email inbox. And if you have any questions or want to know more about it, just email us at info@ourhenhouse.org. And again, if you want to join the flock and get this bonus, you can go to ourhenhouse.org/donate. Now, Hayden Hunter will join us. She is Director of Investigations for Last Chance for Animals, and as such, she manages the organization's investigators throughout the United States and Canada who are working to expose the reality of the lives of animals in industries catering to humans. Welcome to our Hen House, Hayden.
Thank you for having me.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you because I really want to find out about a specific case that you're working on, but I'd really like to start by just talking a little bit about Last Chance for Animals. Can you tell us a little bit, for those who aren't familiar with your organization, about the history and the mission?
Sure. Last Chance for Animals was actually founded a little over 30 years ago. They're an international nonprofit organization, and we're dedicated to eliminating animal exploitation through education, investigations, legislation, and media attention.
So how long have you been involved with Last Chance, and exactly what is your role there?
I'm the Director of Investigations, and I actually started with them in 2015.
And what does it mean to be the Director of Investigations? What kind of investigations do you conduct?
We look into everything from animals used in entertainment, the fur and food industry, factory farms, of course, and animals used in entertainment, as well as animals used in research.
I know that you wanted to talk specifically about a recent investigation, and tell us about this latest investigation and a little bit. I know you can't go into too much detail. You can't go into any detail that will reveal too much about what you do, but tell us a little bit about who conducted it.
Well, this investigator had been with us for a while and had done a few investigations, and ITR was actually chosen randomly as all of our targets. We basically just...
And what is ITR?
Yeah, it's International Toxicology Research Labs. Okay. And they are based in Montreal. And they test cosmetics, they test commercial and household chemicals, as well as pharmaceutical and genetic testing.
There's a lot of these kinds of labs, and they kind of do contract testing for almost anybody who wants them to test something on animals. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. And they're not necessarily just Canadian companies either. They're a lot of companies from Japan, pharmaceutical companies from Japan as well as the U.S.
Now, had you heard information about what was going on there, or is there some other reason why you chose this particular lab?
No, we just actually chose them at random. Canada, there are an awful lot of animal research facilities in Canada, and this was just one that happened to be looking for staff that our investigator was qualified for, and applied and spent 4 months there as a technician.
So is that generally how your investigators get access? They just apply for... They must be fairly experienced in the areas that they're working
correct.
in. And they apply for jobs?
Yes, absolutely.
What is the experience like for them? I'm always interested in the personality of these people, and they're obviously people who care a lot about animals and are willing to go in and witness bad things happening to animals. Can you tell us a little bit about, you know them, so what is this experience like for them?
It varies from investigation to investigation. It's very difficult to really prepare yourself for what you're about to see and witness, and close yourself off emotionally when you enter these facilities. You have to keep reminding yourself that the bigger picture is that we can stop this, we can change this, we can present it to the public and to Parliament and see what we can do about ending the suffering of these animals. So we look for people that can understand that there's a bigger picture, and that whatever they're going through, whatever they're suffering, it's for the animals, this is lifelong. And also for the investigators, sometimes, you bring home these images and you have nightmares, and it can be very traumatic. It's tough to find someone that's qualified to get into these facilities, as well as someone that has their head together and can handle what they're about to witness time and time again.
Yeah, I think it really takes a special breed of person, and I don't think I could do it, and I think there are a lot of people who couldn't do it. It just takes an ability to, in the first place, you have to essentially be a spy, you're acting a total part all day. Just doing that is emotionally wearing, and then to witness this horror. So I couldn't admire more the people who are doing this, and I really hope that this work, which is just must be so harrowing, leads to results. So we talked a little bit about what toxicity labs do in general, but let's talk a little bit specifically about what your team uncovered at ITR.
Right. So we uncovered some cruelty. Definitely, there were animals that had been shaken and slammed onto tables and lifted by their ears. These kinds of things that were documented, as well as some of the behavioral issues that are rather stereotypical, unfortunately, of animals in captivity, spinning in their cages and pulling out their own hair, as self-mutilation was quite common as well, and it's difficult.
So as always, I guess what was uncovered is a combination of kind of gratuitous cruelty that, these animals are just not treated as well as they could be, but then inherent cruelty, that what's happening to them is just horrible, regardless of whether it's being done in the best way possible. What do you hope to achieve through revealing what's going on there?
Well, we're hoping that they're going to see that this is a problem. We did file complaints with the Ministry of Agriculture, the Ministry of Natural Resources, the Ministry of Flora and Fauna, as well as the SPCA. And this isn't actually an ongoing investigation, so we're not finished yet. But we are hoping to be able to pass some bills in regards to ending cosmetic testing in Canada. So it's an ongoing battle.
The primary goal is to pass new laws or to actually get enforcement against this particular lab?
Yes, both.
What has been the response so far?
We've had very little response altogether, but we are continuing to pursue the complaint.
So what charges, are you hoping the charges will be brought?
Yes, definitely against the individuals that committed the crimes, because animal cruelty was definitely documented at this location.
So again, it sounds similar to what happens in so many investigations into factory farms, that there's a possibility of finding workers who have committed this kind of gratuitous cruelty, but it's a much harder case to make that the actual cruelty that's inherent in the industry is illegal. Is that right?
Yes, correct.
What do you say? I mean, it's interesting because so much of what the movement is focused on right now is factory farming and animals in the food industry. And I think people tend to think that animals used in research or even in toxicity testing, that it's more necessary. So what do you say to people? What is your argument to people who think that this kind of testing is necessary in order to protect humans?
Yeah, well, I mean, there are so many alternatives available, and they're currently being used in Europe, such as human cells and tissue, the use of biochips. Animal research is one of the worst forms of systemic animal abuse. It subjects these animals to a lifetime of torture, and it's essentially unregulated. Evidence that animal tests have little reliability, with a shocking 92% of successful animal trials failing during human clinical trials, according to the FDA.
So what can our listeners do? I mean, it sounds like it's going to be very hard to get any action taken against ITR. What can our listeners do to help encourage action?
Absolutely follow us on social media, sign petitions. They do work. Writing to your government representatives, speaking up for animals, and sharing information with others is what's really going to push for change. We need to have our voices being heard.
How big is this industry? Specifically the toxicity testing, which is, I mean, they just test they test cosmetics, they test household products. How big an industry is this, and how many animals are we talking about?
In Canada alone, it's very widespread. And it's not just being done in toxicology labs that are privatized. This is done in universities throughout the country as well.
Well, thanks so much for uncovering it. It sounds like uncovering it is the first step, and the next step is going to be tough because the laws just aren't there. So the next step might be just to make the public aware of what's going on, encourage people to use cruelty-free products, and try to get some better laws passed. Is that what the goals are?
Yes, absolutely, and definitely speaking to government officials.
Well,
letting our voices being heard. This isn't what Canada's about.
I certainly hope that you have success in that, and by bringing this to light, it's much more likely that people are going to be paying attention. So thanks so much for telling us about it today on our Hen House.
Thank you very much.
please like us. Check us out on social media and like, follow, do whatever you need to do to keep us on your radar. On Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, we are at Our Hen House, all one word. Also, you can find us online at ourhenhouse.org. And if you want to get in touch with us, or if you have any questions, or if you have any quandaries that you want us to consider addressing on the air, you can email us at info@ourhenhouse.org.
Anxieties are rising. First article from the National Review. It's a column by Wesley Smith. Humans are not just another animal. Okay? There is too much anti-humanism around these days. Efforts large and small that either state or insinuate that we are just another animal in the forest. And his example of this is an article in The Economist, which he thought was interesting, or otherwise interesting. And this is the quote that he's so upset about. The whole leather industry, based as it is on animal hides, is vulnerable these days to sensibilities about the relationship between human beings and other animals that would scarcely have crossed people's minds in former years. So, I'm reading this and thinking, what is in that particular quote that got him so upset? All right. The objectionable term, according to Wesley, is other animals. And just from using that word "other," Wesley assumes that his bet is that the reporter was inserting ideology into the story. Unfortunately, I really doubt that the reporter was inserting ideology into the story. I think the reporter was just, using the English language in a perfectly appropriate way. But this idea that we would identify humans as other animals, even though Wesley does admit that that's actually biologically valid, but we shouldn't say it because it's just making humans and animals morally equivalent. Just like Ingrid Newkirk, who he describes as PETA's alpha wolf, did when she famously said, "A rat is a pig, is a dog, is a boy." And of course, Ingrid Newkirk, when she said that, it's always quoted out of context, because when she said it, she said, when it comes to suffering, a rat is a pig, is a dog, is a boy. So it's not only a quote out of context, changing its meaning, but who cares? Who cares? Oh my God. No, but Wesley cares. He does. He admits that humans are animals, but you shouldn't ever say it because humans are morally different from animals. Our lives matter more because we are more than the mere sum of our biology. Why are animals the mere sum? What does that even mean, to be the sum of your biology? For example, only humans have ethical duties, one of which is to treat animals humanely because we understand they feel pain and can suffer. It always drives me crazy when articles say that that what animal rights people believe is that animals should have the same rights as humans. I don't know anybody who actually believes that. That's not what anybody believes. Animals should have the rights that are appropriate to them. So, he's just fighting against a completely crazy idea. This isn't even what anybody's saying. Nobody's saying humans are exactly the same as other animals. They're just saying that, humans should have what is due to them, and animals should have what is due to them. And we're all animals because that's the way it is. and it's particularly ironic that the one thing that he picks out that divides us is that our obligation to treat them humanely. I have to say, if that's the thing that's making us human, not many of us are human. Most of us are failing at humanity. Well, let's face it, most of us are failing at humanity. Now, there's a quote for you. Okay, our second story is from NPR. The name of the article is "Arcade Hunting, No Tribute to the Great Outdoors." And it's just this little column. And it says this was heard on Weekend Edition Saturday. So that's where it's quoted from. And it's about Ryan Zinke, who is, of course, our new Secretary of, I guess he's not that new anymore, Secretary of the Interior. And apparently he's just installed an arcade game in the department's cafeteria. It's called Big Buck Hunter Pro. And people who work for the Department of the Interior can now take their lunch break by aiming toy rifles at a video screen and shooting at animated elk, antelope, caribou, and deer. All right, that's bad enough. But I don't think, that's just something terrible that's happened, but I'm not sure it's a sign of rising anxieties. It's this article. He's so horrified by this. The bucks fall over dead, but don't bleed. It's a game. And Secretary Zinke apparently said this was to highlight sportsmen and their contributions to conservation. And according to this writer, he doesn't hunt, or she doesn't hunt. I do not find hunting a sport as long as the deer and bears can't shoot back. All right, sounds good so far, right? But I know a few hunters and have done hunting stories. And every hunter I've asked wants people to understand that they're hunters, not killers. Hunters observe rules. They respect their prey. They often crawl and scrape, hide and run, crouch, shiver, and wait for hours just to take a single shot at a beautiful deer, sprinting and miss. As James Swan, the nature writer and hunter, says, there is a special fondness in our hearts for wild things, and a hunter must work through guilt feelings to be successful. The more one learns about wild animals, the more one develops a fondness for them. Well, what I say to this is bullshit. This is so stupid. Hunters want people to understand that they're hunters, not killers. They kill the animal after they hunt. Face the facts, folks. What you're out there to do, all right, maybe you're not so good at it sometimes, but what you're out there to do is to kill animals. You're not some kind of virtuous folks who are so much better than anybody who would play this video game. But he's horrified by the video game because hunters don't just aim, fire, and fell deer like bowling pins. Well, yes, they do. It's a lot better to play the video game than it is to go out in the woods and kill the animals. Play the video game if you want, if you can satisfy your urges. Maybe then you'll get too busy and addicted to the video game, and it will stop you from going out and hunting and killing the animals. This is the stupidest article. No tribute to the great outdoors. Oy vey. All right. Our next article is from the Ferris State Torch. And this is a student paper. Where's the beef? Don't let your love for animals determine what you eat. This is from one Megan Luton, and it's an opinion piece, and it has every single rising anxiety that, not from the industry, but the individual rising anxieties of people who still eat meat. I've always considered myself to be an animal lover. I'd rather spend time with dogs and cats than other people. If I find a bug in my house, I let it outside rather than step on it. I spend more money on things for my pet fish than I do for myself. However, she still eats meat. I love steak, chicken, milk, and eggs. All right, here are her reasons. I was raised this way. She's not sure it will ever change. It's just the way I am. Since when has I was raised this way and it's just the way I am any kind of a defense to anything? Anybody could say that about anything. It's just the way I am. That's meaningless. It's like the best article that people can come up with. But she's very offended that people who, haven't cut meat out of their lives aren't considered animal lovers. Just because I won't give up meat doesn't make me a hypocrite. Well, yeah, it does. I'm sorry, but yeah, it does. And it doesn't make me love animals any less. Well, maybe you love them, but you're kind of loving them to death and then eating them. Like what? It's so bizarre. Quote, there are so many different ways other than veganism to show your love and appreciation for the animal kingdom. Well, that's true. There are many, that's certainly true. And she has many great suggestions: volunteering at animal shelters, cleaning up beaches, avoiding SeaWorld. Veganism isn't the only option to help animals. I think she's thinking that veganism is a way to help animals. Whereas, as we all know, veganism is a way to avoid torturing and killing animals. It's not just a positive. It's erasing the negative. But, she's missing that. And she really doesn't like that. She's obviously struggling. It's so clear from this. This really is a rising anxiety. Quote, the community of animal lovers shouldn't be divided over who eats meat and who doesn't. Instead, we should all work together to help the environment. Why the environment? Why not the animals? Anyway, regardless of what everyone has on their dinner plate. Oh, geez. If people could think their way out of a paper bag, the world would be a much better place.
Did you know that you can dedicate a podcast episode to someone you love? For $200, you can not only honor a loved one, human or non, but at the same time support our Henhouse's efforts to change the world for animals. And as a bonus, we'll throw in a 1-year flock membership. Our Henhouse is a 501c3 nonprofit, and we rely on your contributions to support our efforts to change the world for animals. We've been on the air every single week without missing one since January 2010. For more information on how to dedicate a podcast episode or just to throw us some cash, visit ourhenhouse.org/donate.
Thanks so much for joining us for this week's show. As always, if you liked it, please support us. You can leave a good review on iTunes, like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram or on Twitter. If you shop on Amazon, you can use Amazon Smile using our Henhouse as your favorite charity. Best of all, you can help support us financially by joining our flock at ourhenhouse.org/donate. And if you're one of our listeners who does support us, and I really can't tell you how much we appreciate it. If you are, thank you so much. We'll be back next week with a brand new show, so don't forget to subscribe in iTunes or on your favorite podcatcher. In the meantime, keep doing whatever it is that you do to change the world for animals, because you are all they've got.